The clatter of silverware and the dull hum of chatter echoed through the ornate dining room. Crystal glasses shimmered under the chandelier, reflecting a world of privilege I was born into, but never truly belonged in. "Dad, I'm not asking for your blessing," I said calmly, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm telling you, I'm with Noah." A sudden silence fell over the long mahogany table like a snapped violin string. My father's eyes froze on me mid-chew. He slowly set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, his expensive suit barely creasing. "Noah," he said, voice coated in disbelief. "The mechanic?" My mother shifted uncomfortably beside him, but said nothing. My brother's girlfriend bit her lip to hide a smirk. Across the table, Aunt Val sipped her wine, clearly bracing for the explosion. "He's not just a mechanic," I replied, keeping my voice firm but respectful. "He owns his own garage. He's building something." My father laughed. Not the warm, amused kind of laugh, but cold and sharp, like shattered glass. "Sweetheart," he said, dabbing at the corner of his mouth with a cloth napkin, "do you really expect me to sit here and pretend that you, my only daughter, think it's appropriate to date a grease-stained nobody who fixes brakes for a living?" I blinked. His words stung, but I had prepared myself. What I hadn't prepared for was what came next. "You walk into this house, under my roof, wearing my name, and you insult this family with some," he trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. "Scrapyard boyfriend? He treats me with more respect than half the people at this table," I snapped, surprising even myself. My father stood abruptly. His chair screeched against the hardwood floor. "If you leave this house tonight and go back to him," he said, voice low and deadly serious, "don't come back. You hear me, Elise? Don't come back." The room shrank around me. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I stood tall. "I hear you," I whispered. I turned and walked out. No tears. No begging. Just the dull ache of knowing I was walking away from everything I had ever known, for someone who made me feel like I was someone. The cold wind hit my cheeks as I stepped outside, wrapping my coat tighter. I dialed Noah. "Hey," he answered instantly. "You okay?" "I'm out," I said simply. "Can you come get me?" 15 minutes later, his dusty blue pickup truck rolled up beside the stone gate. He jumped out and opened the passenger door for me, brushing his hands on his jeans like he wasn't sure he was clean enough for me. His eyes were kind. "Steady. You sure about this?" he asked softly. "I've never been more sure." He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask what happened. He just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other warm over mine. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't walked away from everything. I had walked toward something better, something real. But life wasn't a fairy tale. The next 2 years were tough, grueling, even. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment above the garage. Noah worked 16-hour days. I took up freelance work online and odd jobs just to make ends meet. We barely scraped by. My father didn't call. My mother never texted. I was erased. But no one never once made me feel like I had chosen wrong. Not when we shared microwaved noodles on the floor, not when we argued over bills, not when I cried silently at night wondering if I had given up too much. And then things started to change. Noah landed a city contract to repair municipal vehicles. Then he brought on a few former classmates from vocational school. A year later, he opened a second location. His name started to show up in trade magazines, then industry blogs. He was being called a visionary for the way he ran his operations. He even got invited to speak at an entrepreneur summit downtown. Still, he never changed with success. He still got up at 5 a.m. to check the oil tanks. He still brought me tea when I worked late. He still asked, "How was your day?" like it was the most important question in the world. And then he proposed. It wasn't flashy. Just us. On the rooftop of the garage where we once watched fireworks on New Year's, with the city lights stretching below. He held out a simple ring and said, "You bet on me when no one else would. Now, I want to build the rest of my life betting on us." I said yes through tears. But the real story began at the wedding. Because that's when my father walked in, uninvited. And that's when everything changed. The venue was modest by my family's standards, an ivy-covered greenhouse turned rustic event space, tucked away on the edge of the city. But to me, it was perfect. String lights hung like stars over the tables. Wildflowers decorated every corner. There was no champagne waterfall, no orchestra, but every laugh, every tear that day was real. I had just finished getting ready. My hair was pinned softly over one shoulder, a simple lace dress hugging my figure. Not designer, but it felt like me. As I glanced at my reflection, a mix of nerves and joy danced in my chest. Knock, knock, came a voice behind me. I turned. It was Maya, my maid of honor, and the closest friend I'd made since leaving home. "He's already crying," she said with a grin. "And we haven't even started." I laughed through a swell of emotion. "That makes two of us." We made our way to the garden aisle. The music swelled. The guests stood. I took a deep breath. But just as I stepped forward, there was movement at the back. A man entered quietly, like a shadow cutting across the light. I froze for half a second. Maya tensed beside me. It was my father. Wearing a tailored charcoal suit, hair slicked back, expression unreadable. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look smug. He looked guarded. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small when I looked at him. I looked forward again. And there was Noah, waiting at the altar. His hands folded in front of him, eyes fixed on me, smile tugging at the corners of his lips even as tears glossed his lashes. So I walked. Past the whispers. Past my father. Past my past. Toward the man who had built a future with me. Not for me. The ceremony was breathtaking in its simplicity. We read our vows, mine handwritten in the margins of a notepad I used while working night shifts. His were folded neatly into his back pocket, slightly stained from oil. When he said, "You are my light when the days were dark," his voice cracked. Everyone felt it, even my father. The reception was in full swing. People were dancing. Laughter rolled like thunder under the clear sky. I was mid-conversation with Noah's aunt when Maya hurried over. "Hey," she said quietly, "your dad's here. He wants to speak to Noah." My stomach tightened. "Now." She nodded. He said, "It's important." I spotted them near the catering tent, my father, hands behind his back, and Noah, polite as ever. As I walked over, I caught the last part of their conversation. "Not about pride," my father was saying. "It's about being wrong." And I was. Noah looked him in the eye. "Calm. Respectful. I didn't expect you to come." "I know," my father said. "But I needed to see it. Needed to see what kind of man my daughter chose. Because she always had a good eye, better than mine." There was a pause. Then, he reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a slim black envelope. "I thought this might be useful," he said, offering it to Noah. Noah opened it slowly. Inside was a business card. But not just any card. It was from Pierce Ventures, my father's private equity firm. On the back, scribbled in my father's handwriting, were the words, "Let's talk expansion. The city could use more of your kind." I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding. Noah looked up, stunned. "I know you don't need my money," my father continued. "But I'd like to be part of what you're building. Not to take control. Just to support it." Noah said nothing. He just extended his hand. My father took it, and I saw, for the first time in my life, the two most important men in my world meeting in the middle, not as rivals, but as equals. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the music faded, I sat barefoot with Noah under the fairy lights, my dress bunched around me, head on his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a lock of hair behind my ear. "I'm more than okay," I whispered. And I was. Not because everything had gone perfectly, but because even when it hadn't, we kept choosing each other. Again and again. Noah didn't accept the offer right away. In fact, for a full week after the wedding, the business card sat untouched on our kitchen counter, wedged between a bag of coffee beans and the charger for my tablet. Every time I passed it, I stared at the familiar crest embossed in silver. Pierce Ventures. "Why haven't you called him?" I finally asked one morning, pouring cereal into 2 chipped bowls. Noah looked up from his laptop, his eyes tired but thoughtful. Because I'm still trying to figure out what this means. He offered help, I said gently. Not control. Noah nodded slowly, but I knew what he wasn't saying. He wasn't just building an auto repair business, he was building dignity, pride, on his own terms. And for a man who had been called less than by people like my father, taking help, even offered kindly, felt like an admission he didn't need to make. But things weren't easy. Success had brought more customers, more garages, more employees, more stress. Noah spent nights buried in contracts, training manuals, city permits. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a CEO. And I could see the pressure weighing on him. I took on more myself, handling client outreach, designing his website, keeping books balanced, but it wore on us. Our conversations became brief, rushed. Meals eaten over laptops. Sleep interrupted by buzzing phones and midnight invoices. One evening, I came home to find him sitting in the dark, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Garage 2 lost their floor manager, he said without looking up. And the city inspectors threatening to shut down the East End location because of some zoning issue. I can't keep up. I crossed the room and sat beside him. You're doing everything you can. That's not enough, he murmured. People are depending on me. You're depending on me. I placed my hand over his. I don't need you to be perfect, Noah. I just need you to be here. He turned to me then, eyes rimmed red. Maybe I should call him. The next morning, Noah met my father in a small coffee shop far from the glass towers of downtown. I didn't go. I stayed home, pacing, waiting. When he returned, he looked different. Not defeated. Not triumphant. Just peaceful. He told me he believed in what we're doing, Noah said, setting his keys on the counter. Said he saw in me what he used to see in himself before he got too used to comfort. What does that mean? I asked. It means he's not offering to buy me out. He's offering mentorship, connections, silent investment. He said the only condition was that I never stop being me. My eyes filled. You deserve that. All of it. Noah smiled softly. I said yes. Over the next few months, things changed. Not overnight, but gradually, like spring breaking through winter. With my father's quiet backing, Noah expanded more efficiently. Hired people to handle the logistics so he could return to what he loved, mentoring new mechanics, solving engine puzzles, talking to customers like neighbors. We bought a house, small, charming, with a backyard that needed work and a front porch that caught the sunset perfectly. Life was beginning to feel balanced. One evening, as we sat watching the sky turn gold behind our new home, Noah reached into his pocket and handed me something small. It was the original business card, creased now at the corners. I kept it, he said. Not because of what it offered, but because of what it represented. You chose me, even when your world didn't. I chose us, I whispered. But just when it seemed like life had finally steadied, something unexpected arrived. A letter. From my mother. The envelope was pale blue and smelled faintly of lavender. My heart dropped the moment I saw my mother's handwriting across the front. Delicate, precise, the same cursive I used to trace with my finger as a child on birthday cards and recipe notes. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the coffee table like a sleeping ghost while I paced the living room. Noah watched from the doorway, silent, not pushing. After dinner, I finally peeled it open. Asterisk Elise. I know I have no right to write to you after everything. But I've spent the past 2 years replaying that night over and over in my mind. The night you walked out. The night your father let pride silence his heart, and I let fear silence mine. I wanted to speak up. God, I wanted to. But you know how he is. I told myself I'd talk to you privately. That I'd call. That I'd find a better time. But better times never come when you're too afraid to stand tall. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were always stronger than me. You left. You chose love. I stayed, and I regret it every day. I saw the photos. You looked radiant. I don't know if I'll ever earn a seat in your life again, but I want you to know. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. No pressure. Just love. Mom. Asterisk. My hands trembled. The paper blurred through tears I didn't expect to cry. It wasn't a perfect letter. It didn't erase the silence. But it cracked something open, something tender and unfinished. Noah sat beside me without a word, just wrapped his arm around me and let me fall against him. You okay? He asked softly. I nodded. I think I just needed to hear it, even if it's late. I didn't reply right away. I needed time. Time to untangle the memories of a mother who stood beside my father too quietly, of soft lullabies and withheld hugs, of a woman torn between loyalty and love. But slowly, cautiously, we started writing. No phone calls yet, just letters. She shared stories from her childhood, and I shared mine with Noah. We built a bridge, plank by plank, through pages. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new message. A photo. It was my mother, standing at the edge of a garage. Our garage, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Behind her, Noah stood grinning, grease on his cheek, his hand raised like he'd just made a new friend. I stared at the screen. He'd invited her. Without telling me. I wasn't angry. I was stunned. When he got home, I confronted him. You brought her to the shop? She asked if she could see it, he said gently. I told her it wasn't my place. But she wanted to understand the life you built. So, I figured maybe she needed to see it with her own eyes. I didn't respond. Not at first. I just stared at him, this man who had been called unworthy, now holding my family together better than anyone ever had. She cried, he added softly, when she saw your name on the office door. That weekend, I met my mother for coffee. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Not in a bad way, just softened, like time had sanded down her edges. We didn't talk about the past. Not immediately. Instead, we talked about Noah, the business, our house, the garden I had planted, and how my tomato plant kept dying. She offered advice like we were old friends. And then, just before we parted, she reached across the table and said, You saved yourself, Elise. But you didn't just walk away, you built something. And I hope someday you can forgive me for not walking beside you. I squeezed her hand. My voice shook, but I said what I knew I was ready to say. I think I already have. That night, I told Noah everything. And we sat under the same porch where we had watched our first sunset months ago. Only now we were different. Stronger. Not just survivors, but builders of something good. Something lasting. Noah turned to me, eyes twinkling. You know what I realized? He said. What? You didn't just prove them wrong. You taught them something. And you never had to raise your voice to do it. The morning of the community award ceremony dawned cooler than expected for late summer. The air was sharp with the smell of dew and fresh-cut grass, and a light breeze rustled the folded paper programs on the wooden benches set up in the town square. Noah had been nominated by the city council for his contribution to local employment and youth mentorship programs. What had started as a single garage had grown into a respected network of auto shops that doubled as learning hubs, offering second chances to young people, some of whom had never been given a first one. But Noah wasn't nervous about the speech or the ceremony. He was nervous about who was coming, because my father had RSVP'd yes. I spotted him even before Noah did. He walked in quietly alone, hands clasped behind his back. No fanfare. No entourage. He looked smaller in that crowd, like just another man trying to understand where he fit. Noah was backstage, fixing his collar in front of a dusty mirror, when I joined him. You ready? I asked. He turned and smiled, the lines around his eyes deeper now, but filled with quiet fire. Only if you're sitting front row. I leaned in and kissed his cheek. Always. When Noah took the stage, the applause was thunderous. Some of the young apprentices he'd mentored were in the front row, cheering loudest. He looked out at the sea of faces and paused. Then he began. I was told once that I'd never amount to much, that my job was dirty, that my dreams were too small. He smiled gently. But the truth is, Some of the cleanest hearts come from the dirtiest hands. The crowd quieted. I didn't build this alone. I had someone who believed in me when I didn't have more than a wrench and a broken-down truck. She saw more in me than what I was. She saw what I could be. His eyes met mine across the crowd. And because of her, I didn't just fix cars. I found purpose. The entire square rose to their feet when he finished. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. But what happened next stayed between just three of us. As Noah stepped down from the stage, my father walked forward. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just steady. He extended his hand. Noah hesitated, but only for a breath, then reached out and shook it. And then, in front of hundreds of strangers, my father turned to me. "Elise," he said, his voice low but steady, "you were right." There were no grand apologies. No excuses. Just those words. And in those words, I felt the weight of years lifting off my chest. Later that evening, we hosted a small gathering at our home, friends, employees, neighbors. Laughter echoed off the walls. Plates clinked. Someone brought cake, and Noah, ever the humble host, grilled burgers in the backyard like he hadn't just been honored in front of the entire city. My father came, too. Not as the intimidating figure he once was, but as a man trying to reconnect with the family he almost lost. He sat quietly with my mother on the porch, the two of them catching up in low, thoughtful voices. There was no miracle fix, but there was effort. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and lavender, Noah came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You remember when you walked out of that house?" he whispered. I nodded. I was terrified. He kissed my temple. "You changed everything. Just by choosing what felt right." I turned in his arms to face him. "No. We changed everything. Together." A few months later, we hosted a fundraiser at the new training center Noah built downtown. My father donated half the cost anonymously, though word got out. He never asked for credit. He just wanted to help build something lasting. And on a small plaque inside the entrance, beneath the center's name, were the words, "For those told they never would, may they always know they can." People talk about revenge. But what we built wasn't revenge. It was redemption. It was choosing love without bitterness, rising without cruelty, and proving that kindness is never weakness, it's power. And in the end, the real win wasn't proving anyone wrong. It was living right,